Iran had warned since day one that any war against it will turn regional. And 2 weeks into the war, its warning has not only turned true, it has brought the Middle East to a point of no return. But today I want to look at this war from a very specific vantage point: Saudi Arabia. The Arab world's most powerful state, a country trying to shift the perception of the region from conflicts to commerce. At this moment, I have someone in this episode who had unusually close access to the Saudi leadership. Professor Bernard A. Haeckel of Princeton University, a scholar of Middle Eastern politics who has also spent years engaging directly with the Saudi Crown Prince, discussing everything from geopolitics to video games. I'm Ananya Dutta. Let's get started. There was a time when Iran's first supreme leader, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, called Saudi Arabia's rulers vile and ungodly, accusing them of always piercing through the hearts of the Muslims from the back. And this was one of the kind insults he hurled at Riyadh. Relations between the Ayatollahs and the Al Saud were bitter since the Iranian Revolution. Having overthrown a monarchy at home, Khomeini called for Islamic revolution across the Middle East. That alarmed Saudi Arabia, the only country in the world named after a family and one that has been ruled by a monarchy since its very birth. Mohammed bin Salman was just 3 years old when across the Persian Gulf, Khomeini took his last breath. A Cold War, decades of proxy conflicts, and countless diplomatic crises later, it was China that surprisingly brought the two rivals to the same table in 2023. The diplomatic talk came at a moment when Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman was gradually taking the reins from his aging father, King Salman, and reshaping Saudi Arabia's role in the region.
The toppling of the Iranian regime could lead to a civil war in Iran. And a civil war in Iran would mean chaos and a failed state. And that is a country with 92 million people. A civil war could have spillover effects in the Gulf, including on Saudi Arabia. So the Saudis and other Gulf countries see the Iranians as neighbors. They may not like the regime, and they don't, but they know that they have to live with them. And so what they would like is to have a regime that is contained, that is less revolutionary, less radical, less militant, that just gets on with the business of building and developing the country and stops its revolutionary ideological activities. So I think if the choice that the Saudis are faced with is a regime that survives maybe more militant but contained versus chaos, they would choose the former.
MBS, as he's often referred to, has always had big plans for the Saudi kingdom. He realized very early on that depending on oil is not sustainable for the economy. So he pumped money in infrastructure, tourism, technology, and global commerce. Some plans worked, like participation of women in the workforce rose from 17% to close to 37% under MBS. Other plans flatlined, like Neom, a futuristic $500 billion city planned along the Red Sea coast. Today, its cost has run into trillions of dollars with no clarity in sight. Today's war was not part of MBS's plan.
The official spokesperson for the Ministry of Defense, Major General Turki al-Maliki, announced that the U.S. Embassy in the capital, Riyadh, was targeted in an attack involving 2 drones.
Iranian drones hit the US Embassy in Riyadh. The Saudis have intercepted multiple missiles aimed at American military bases. 1 American soldier and 2 international workers have already died near a US airbase. Missile attacks have shut down the kingdom's largest oil refinery, and tankers remain stalled at the Strait of Hormuz. These are not the visuals the Saudi Crown Prince wanted the world to see.
I think that the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia knew that this war was going to happen. He's been saying that, and he was, very fearful that this war would happen for many, many months now. So I am not sure whether he knew the exact timing of the attack. Probably not. But he was very much against this war because he was worried about exactly what is happening now, which is that Iran would try to burn the region by attacking him and attacking other Gulf countries and energy and oil installations. And this is something he didn't want. So he was lobbying very hard for the war not to happen. before it did, and he's lobbying and working very hard to try to stop it now.
In his first speech as the supreme leader of Iran, Mujtaba Khamenei has warned that these attacks will continue unless the Gulf countries shut the American bases in the country.
As we had given an explicit warning, and without carrying out any aggression against those regional countries, we remain committed to the necessity of friendship between ourselves and those neighbors, and have merely targeted those U.S. bases. From now on, we will also be compelled to continue this action.
And that brings us to MBS's brainchild, Vision 2030. It aims to diversify the Saudi economy away from oil by attracting foreign investment and turning the kingdom into a regional business hub. With the vision just 4 years away, this war can spook investor confidence.
They have huge infrastructure development projects. They have, as part of this diversification of the Saudi economy and of other economies, they need peace, stability, order. They don't want missiles. They don't want, war. All of this is hugely problematic for countries like Saudi Arabia because it hinders the vision.
MBS, a young crown prince at the age of 40, has upset many of his older advisors by approaching the economy in a futuristic sense. With NEOM already failing, Vision 2030 cannot afford to even appear to fail. And that brings us to the trusted friend Saudis have always fallen back on: oil. The conflict has created the largest disruption in oil supply in history, with up to 8 million barrels per day removed from global supply due to disruptions around the Strait of Hormuz. The country has cut output because its oil-filled tankers ready to be shipped are halted in the strait that is practically being controlled by Iran. But there is a silver lining for the Saudis, who have a second shipping route through the Red Sea. Saudi Arabia has already started to redirect large volumes of oil exports through the alternative ports. But that isn't devoid of risks.
The Saudis are very well prepared. They have a pipeline, it's called the East-West Pipeline, that can, originally I think was for 5 million barrels. They've increased its capacity to 7 million barrels. So that's quite a bit of Saudi production. It's not all of Saudi production. Saudi production is 10 million barrels, potentially 12 million barrels. So there's still some Saudi oil that's not being sold. Some of it is being used domestically, of course. But this pipeline is vulnerable. It can be attacked by the Iranians. So it's not like it's easy for them to just use it without taking any risk. I think the Iranians are likely to target this pipeline.
For the past few years, Saudi Arabia has been trying to reshape the politics of the Middle East in a very deliberate way. Instead of endless rivalries and proxy wars, Riyadh restored diplomatic ties with Iran, opened quiet channels with Israel, and held a truce with the Houthis in Yemen. In many ways, he has tried to shift the political conversation in the Middle East from Islamism to nationalism. But the war now unfolding threatens to undo much of that architecture. If tensions with Iran spiral again, the fragile detente between Riyadh and Tehran could collapse. Reuters is reporting that Riyadh has already warned Tehran that if the kingdom continues to come under attack, it will respond in kind. The situation also risks reigniting proxy conflicts from Yemen to Iraq to Lebanon, and Saudi Arabia may ultimately be forced to choose sides in the widening regional confrontation.
If the Saudis decide to retaliate militarily against the Iranians, the first thing they would do is they would offer their bases and their military facilities to the Americans. So the Americans at the moment are not using Saudi facilities to attack Iran. And, if the Saudis were to give the Americans their facilities, that would make life a lot easier for the Americans because the distances are much shorter. And so the bombers and so on wouldn't have to fly so far. And the impact, the intensity of the war would increase considerably because you could then fly many more sorties and many more bombing raids and so on. So that's the first thing that the Saudis would do, I imagine. And then if they were to join themselves militarily, they have a very, very large air force. The Saudis do. I mean, numerically, many, many more planes than many other countries in the world. And this is a combination of American and European fighter jets. They have missiles that they can use, ballistic missiles that they can use against Iran. So, the Saudis have significant capabilities if they choose to use them.
And speaking of sides, this war could rewrite Saudi-US relations. MBS has shared a good relationship with the US president, but whether he gave Riyadh a heads up before the war, that's difficult to say.
And I heard they were sending missiles to UAE. I said, that's strange. UAE is like the banker for Iran. They're like the banker. Qatar, their neighbors, they got along okay. Saudi Arabia. All of a sudden, Kuwait is getting hit. Bahrain is getting, all these countries are getting hit. There was no expert that would say that was going to happen. It's not a question of like, gee, should you have known? And if we did know, big deal. I mean, we have to do what we have to do.
It is possible that after this war is over, that Riyadh might reassess how valuable this relationship is, whether America can defend the kingdom, whether it's, it has to kind of reassess its strategic and security arrangements. But the relationship between the Saudis and the Americans when it comes to the military and security is extremely it's of long duration. It's 80 years old, and most of the equipment, most of the training is American. So it's very hard to switch to a new kind of security or military arrangement.
Republican Senator and Trump ally Lindsey Graham has been the most explicit in pressing Washington's Arab allies to participate. After a trip to Israel, he questioned why the US should defend partners like Saudi Arabia that refuse to take part in what he described as a shared struggle against Iran. He has warned that there will be consequences if Saudi Arabia does not join the war.
So I think as the war continues, you'll see that President Trump and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia will be seeing the world and seeing this war in the same fashion, not wanting it to continue. And you will see a divergence between Israel and America. Israel wants the war to continue, whereas America increasingly will not want this war to continue. So I don't see President Trump putting pressure on the Saudis at the moment to join the war. He might put pressure to allow Saudi bases to be used by American forces. And then as far as Senator Lindsey Graham is concerned, I wouldn't take much of what he says seriously.
Saudi Arabia does not want Iran to win, but it also does not want Iran to collapse in chaos, because either outcome could destabilize the entire Gulf and derail the transformation MBS is trying to build.
Saudi Arabia was hoping that after the détente agreement of March 2023, where they reestablished diplomatic relations and reopened their embassies and gave visas to each other's citizens, that Iran would eventually moderate, that it would build connections with Saudi, commercial connections, cultural connections, and that once the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei dies, you would end up with a more moderate regime in power. That was Riyadh's hope. So they were looking at a 10-year time horizon where reestablishing connection and hoping that the Iranians become more moderate. Now that is not likely to happen. What we have is a regime that's much harder in charge, and so Riyadh still wants to have relations with Iran, and is hoping that it will moderate. It's unlikely to moderate.
For the Crown Prince, the war is not just another Middle East conflict. It's a threat to his legacy as the next king of Saudi Arabia. I'm Ananya Dutta. Thanks for watching.